Aha.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm swell. How you doing, Bob?
You can hear me. I can hear you. No technical problems tonight. Knock on wood.
Yeah, let's hope that continues.
Uh, so it's Tuesday. We're here. We'll be here next Tuesday. Um, I am a little bit under the weather, so I'm trying to pop some lozenges and get through it. But we got a lot to talk about tonight. We have some great guests coming on. We're going to talk about their book and their careers. um, what do you want to talk about first? Because I got some things. We've kind of mentioned
What do I want to talk about first? Well,
yeah.
first of all, um, I think you need to get a plan that gives you frequent flyer miles for the conventions you drive to.
I think that sounds like a great idea because
Yeah.
I don't fly to many conventions. We did go. We were at Terrificon last week. If you've been paying attention to Pop Culture Squad on all our social medias, we did a bunch of cool stuff. We did a walkthrough kind of from the beginning to the end of the floor, which was really fun. And then kind of seeing how that Terrificon is laid out, because it is, I think, one of the smartest laid out convention floors that I've seen. I'll tell you why. When you walk in, there's one way in and one way out, right? There's plenty of exits for emergencies, but there's one way in and one way out. And it's plenty of space. It's big open space. But the one way in, you end up at the beginning with a whole bunch of comic book vendors. Old, cheap comics, fancy comics, expensive comics. Heritage Auctions is in the front. CGC is around there too. There's a bunch. It's just like the first section is all comics, and maybe a couple of toys, but for the most part comics and maybe vintage toys. And then you get into the next stage where there's some merch and some toys and cosplay gear and whatever. And then as you go back further, you get to kind of their they call their artist alley, and it's your maker area. It's the people who are making their own comics,
Right.
printing their own stuff, or people who do, make little tchotchkes and merch, like kind of based on pop culture stuff that's, kind of one person type of things. And as you go back beyond that, you hit the creator alley, which is all of the known creators, comic book writers and artists and inkers and letterers and whatever. And there's a decent bunch of rows of that. And once you get past that, that is when you get to the celebrity guests that they have, where you get your, autographs and pictures. And so in order to get to the celebrity guests, you have to go through all of the rest of that. You can't avoid any of that if you want to go to the celebrity guests, which is, let's be honest, a big draw for people coming to comic conventions.
No, it's I used to work on the Chicago Comic Con from 76 to 85, and I've done a million conventions, and I've helped organize shorter shows, one-day shows. The hardest thing in the world to do back then was keep the retailers who didn't like each other apart.
Well, I'm sure that's something.
That was by far the hardest thing we had to do. Luckily, I didn't have to do that. That was Larry Sherritt, and he did a wonderful job because he's still alive today. So obviously, he did a wonderful job. But there are people you couldn't put next to other people, and people who would always say, "Oh, that guy's stealing from me." It's a real pain in the ass.
Yeah. So it was a great show. We had a lot. We were there on behalf of Hero Initiative, as we normally do at Terrificon, and my wife Sherry does a terrific job, pun intended, of managing the line and the order around Walter and Louise Simonson. She sits with them and makes sure that the line is orderly and people are getting the time that they need, and they have an expectation of when they're around, because they don't have to be wherever they want to be. They can be where they want to be.
Sure. How does Sherry do that? How does she manage the lines? I
Well,
mean,
let me
does
tell
she,
you.
if people just are being jerks, she just kills them or what?
Let me. He does a fantastic job. I would not want to do that job. She takes a lot of pride in it, and there are people who are being jerks, and she will
Yes,
kind of put them in place. And um, but the other part of it is she really does go out of her way to help people who are in a tough spot where they waited and maybe they left and something happened and then they came back. That she'll try and make up for things, and get them get them the things that they're trying to get so that everybody has a good experience.
that
Um,
is wonderful work.
Dealing with CGC people getting CGC signatures, um, and she's less patient with them. Um, uh, and kind of also takes the lead from Walter and Louise and what they want to do and how they want to run things. It's always been it's she does a fantastic job. I'm really impressed by the way she handles it. And not to diminish the fact that there's a contingent of Boy Scouts that help run the show for Mitch and help volunteer their services. And there's usually a guy who helps out as well and kind of stands by and makes sure if a louder voice is needed. Um,
But they don't offer college credit. Bob and I do a show every year with that's run by our friend Ed Cato up in Ithaca. You've probably heard of Ithacon because it is such a wonderful name, Ithacon, and it's a wonderful show. It's a smaller show. It's a 2-day show, and Ed has all of his students working as not quite volunteers, I guess, uh, from his marketing classes, and they learn their stuff. They know they learn how to do events, which is a big deal in marketing, always will be. And I'm so impressed that he figured out like, wow, we could do this show better if, and it was
right.
that's great.
So anyway, Terrificon was fantastic. I had a great time. There's a bunch of stuff on our social medias that you can go check out. We did question of the day, 2 days. We're going to ask our guests the question of the day, and you can participate later when we get to the end of the show. Let's talk about a little bit of other news. I want to talk about this, and it keeps coming up. So
Oh, yeah,
so
your former neighbors.
yeah, so um, we have we had some issues last week, so we didn't get a chance to talk about um their presence at San Diego Comic-Con. The new Diamond had used the existing space, just had some toys and some of the folks who work there. There's still some people who work at the new Diamond who are friends of ours, and we support them and we want them to continue to be employed. But they are giving up their space at San Diego Comic-Con next year.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the things I want to talk about with Diamond is there's a good piece on graphic policy because they've done a great job, throughout this whole thing, talking about the fact that there's a whole bunch of discovery requests that have come in regarding the chapter 11, and we've gotten to the point where we know who is going to be running and taking the assets that were Diamond. But I had a conversation with a small publisher this weekend who's a friend of ours who says they're losing $100,000 worth of product.
Yeah, they are by no means alone, and as you pointed out, that's a smaller publisher.
Well, yes, this publisher is a friend of ours who's been on the show and is a one-man shop, and he had a great analogy in that for those people who don't know what's happening, and we're gonna talk about it just real quickly. Essentially, one of the benefits about Diamond Comics publishing or Diamond Comics distributors was that They had large warehouses, and what they would do is they would allow for publishers to ship their product to the Diamond warehouses without Diamond buying it. So essentially, it's there, and then there would be, with the way that it was described, was it was on consignment, so that when someone actually did order it through the Diamond catalog and bought it, a retailer bought it through Diamond, then Diamond would pay the publisher for those issues that were sold. So this consignment stock, the new owners are saying that they're going to liquidate it and not compensate the publishers for the stock that is theirs. And so the publisher that I spoke to said, it's essentially, imagine if someone parked their car in your driveway and then you sold it and kept the money.
That's a good analogy.
It's a great analogy.
That's a great analogy. Yes, one should think that that shouldn't happen. Now, the laws in every state are different. I don't know what the taxation laws on warehouse floor space, what those laws are like in Maryland. It's possible that that Diamond, or what was Diamond, is
Maryland's
deemed
only
the
one.
Yeah, I
Maryland's
understand.
only one of the.
Yeah, although they had closed others down before that. If they have all this stuff on the floor, they're supposed to pay a tax on it. And if they pay the tax on it, does that mean they have an ownership position? Do they have an equity position? I'm opposed to monopolies, not just for, basic solid anti-capitalism reasons, but because, and this was my first reaction when Diamond became a monopoly. My first reaction was, distributors go out of business all the time. If this one goes out of business, and I love Steve Jeppy, known him 1,000 years. I have a lot of faith in him, but he's one guy, and this is the entire industry. What happens to the entire industry? And now we're finding out.
Right.
It'll go on, but people are losing millions.
Yeah. So what's happened now is that all of these are there have been 4 requests for discovery from Dynamite, from a litany of publishers. And so next steps are that Diamond has to pull all documents and communications requested and figure out what's privileged, hand it over to the groups, and assuming there's no disagreement over privilege, requesters will then need to go over the documents, and from there we might see hearings, testifying, motions, some of the documents requested in the filings. It's
where are you reading from?
This is from Graphic Policy. I'll put the link.
Okay.
And this came out. This was today's article. They've done a great job, kind of following this, and I'll put the link in the comments. Thanks for reminding me, because I want to give credit to the good journalism that's going on out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's deserved, but it's also important for people to know that we're not just. This isn't hearsay.
Sure. I mean, some of it is hearsay because I didn't ask for privilege to divulge the publisher who told me that yesterday, but this weekend.
And that's fine. He's a source.
He's a source, and that source, they were happy that they feel that they're going to survive. They think they're going to survive, but they're definitely hurt. And we hope, things get better. We hope that there's more consistency. We hope that the stores continue to survive. I don't want to belabor this point. There's enough negative stuff in the world right now.
Well, I would like to say one thing about this.
Please do.
What we need in the entire American comics distribution business is a rethink and a readjustment, and we need the cooperation of all of the distributors and publishers to the extent that they are physically able to do so, and all the comic store owners. Some of them haven't changed their business model in half a century, and comic book stores and Earth are not the way they were a half century ago. We need to do some adjusting to make it a more vibrant financial community.
Sure. You're absolutely right about that. I'll give you my little take on that. Is that my local shop, the owner has kind of semi-retired and left it, and his son is running the shop.
Mhm.
And I saw the owner after, I don't normally see him, but I saw him recently, and he, was kind of giving him the update on what's going on and kind of getting his
Right,
take on how he feels, and it's hard for him. Like he doesn't, it's hard for them, for the retailers. The retailers have been struggling with the change in distribution model for the last 5 years, because for so long it was such an easy deal for them. They dealt with whatever nonsense they had to deal with from Diamond, because it was a simple thing. One order, one place that I know where I'm going to get. I know who to yell at. I know what's coming from where. I know when it's coming. So it's been very difficult for them, and them trying to figure it out is part of what the new world we live in. One of the things I wanted to talk about with you real quick, before we bring in our guests, one of them is there. Hopefully the other will show up soon. But uh, it is something that's been bothering me. Is the pie big enough? Do we think? There's so many avenues, so many ways people can get in, so many different things, so many, is there there's the distribution, right? How do stores deal with 3 different distributors or more? How do stores deal with people who want to sell directly to a store, who are small
right,
publishers? How
right.
do how do people who are trying to put something out digitally put it out? Because we had that for a while. Even digital connection was, everybody just went to Comixology and it had the market. And
Right.
Webtoon kind of came along, but now that's gone. Nobody wants Comixology. Comixology doesn't exist anymore. And now there's a couple of competing, um, web digital distribution methods. Is there going to be one? Is there going to be something where you have to go from here to here? You got to go to the Marvel app to do this, or you got to go to DC app to do that, or you got to go to Global Comics, or you got to go to the Neon. I don't know. I can never remember. It's Neon Evangeline. I don't know.
Right. These are growth pains that we should have gone through 20 years ago. The pie will be can become bigger. We have the pie is much smaller than the potential markets, but the comic store owners, as well as the publishers, as well as distributors, all have to get together to figure out that one question: how do we expand the markets? And that's critical. Yeah, comics is getting so big in terms of the number of publishers, the number of titles being released, the amount of ancillary material that's being released, the cost of all of that. And now we're going to get into the tariff zone. Are the publishers going to be passing along the paper price increases, which are going to be massive because the paper comes from Canada? Probably. They can't afford to swallow it. None of
Right.
them can. You can say, well, Disney's got a lot of money. They do. They also got a lot of mice and they fuck like crazy. I just, these are issues that have, sorry, I think I nailed you there. uh,
You can't make me
yeah,
laugh like that tonight.
I'm sorry. But these are issues. These are important issues. People like me have been bitching about this for decades. We have to grow the industry. There's not enough people out there who are reading comics who could be, and would enjoy reading comics. And now that we've expanded the material, the repertoire, it's not just superheroes and a couple of Archie books, and they're going through changes now. Um, it's there's books for almost everybody. They're not
Not Gail
selling.
King, though. Did you hear what Gail King said? No.
What'd she say? God, I have to pay attention
Apparently,
to her.
there was. I'm going to tell you, this is a crazy thing. There was and this is our last bit, and we're going to get Aubrey in real soon. So there was a survey that said, what is the most attractive hobby that a man can do? They asked women, what is the most attractive? Now, obviously, this is biased because we're not taking in, but what is the most attractive hobby for a man? The number one most attractive hobby for a man is reading. And then they asked, they had the top 5 least attractive hobbies. Number 5 least attractive hobby is Magic the Gathering. They're not playing Magic the Gathering. It's just Magic the Gathering is the number 5 least attractive hobby. The number 1 least attractive hobby is reading comic books.
Yes.
Now,
fuck them if they can't take a joke.
So she said she had a ex who had comics, and when she got mad at him, she would go in and take them out of the bags and boards and put them on the ground and stomp on them.
That's not a healthy relationship.
Now,
because there's a professional term for that type of activity. It's called tit for tat.
Sure. But as you said, there are plenty of people out there who would want to read comic books, and there are plenty of people who are starting to read comics. That's one of the best things. Like, I will see on social media, and we're on TikTok, and so I see some of the comic content on TikTok. And one of the things that is as much it can be like, I can get old man syndrome about it. There are so many young people talking about being new to reading comic books. So many people talking about like, hey, this is my favorite artist of all time is somebody who just made like 5 books, right? Now. But and all of that stuff, and there's so much for them to learn and so much for them to see, and I'm there to encourage as much as I can. But like, I do see that growing. I see constantly new people talking about how much they love reading comic books and how much, actually one person said that this a very young person said Longbow Hunters is one of their favorite things that they've ever read.
Well, that's a very intelligent person.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to us as we got through this little bit of jaunt through conventions and comic news. We're going to bring in our guest. I am a big fan of his. I consider him a friend. I am very much enjoying his most recent book, and I did get word that his partner is not going to be here. He's very busy working on the book. So we are going to bring in tonight and talk to Aubrey Sitterson. Hey, Aubrey.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Man, y'all weren't messing around with that intro sequence. And
how's that, huh?
Deep cuts on that one.
Deep went back to the beginning.
Also, Bob availed himself of a new needle drop. That really surprised me.
I like that one, right?
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, we raised the volume once we got to the writer part, right?
It's production values, man.
Also, you picked one of my favorite She-Hulk covers, so I'm here.
Well, that was the first book you assisted edited on, so
it was one of the first. Yeah, maybe the exact first. the way Tom Brevoort's office worked was you joined and you were working on everything. So it's hard to pinpoint at first. That was definitely an early one though. Before we get any deeper, I would just like to apologize on behalf of my co-creator Jed. He was very much looking forward to joining us tonight, but I mentioned it in the chat already. He is deep in production on Free Planet number 10. He's inking pages.
I'm glad that
now.
there's a Free Planet number 10. I'm excited
Number
about that.
10.
Yes,
That's
sir.
optimistic. Wow. Will there still be paper by then?
But we've got our fingers crossed. No, I mean the book's doing great, and it's a work-intensive book, which I think is probably not surprising to anybody who's flipped through it, especially from Jed's perspective. And it necessitates that we work very far in advance. We launched with 6 issues completely done. We took them to comics. Yeah, we had them complete. I've got them right here. I did printouts and brought them to Comics Pro with us when we did that earlier this year, just to show people that this book I'm dedicated to making this book ship on time. And that's one of the benefits of my editorial background, as you highlighted in your intro there, that yeah, man, I can make the trains run on time. I can do that. I can get these books out in stores, in people's hands, month after month. So Jed's working on number 10 right now.
That didn't work out so well for Mussolini.
No. I've studied his mistakes. I know the
pitfalls. Good. That's smart. That's very clever. Like decades ago, I was at a editorial meeting at DC, which was all of the editors and assistant editors and the publisher, and we'd all sit there and absolutely accomplish nothing for several hours. I was not a big fan of
checking out so far. This sounds about right to me.
Yeah. Oh, I never went through that experience at Marvel, but I do know it's very similar from time to time, at least. And we were having sort of a deadline problem at one particular moment, or maybe every particular moment. And our publisher, who at the time was Jeanette Kahn, came in and was, I don't want to say livid, she wasn't, but she was professionally upset, which is her job, and that's right, she should be. So me being a complete idiot, a political activist who can be extremely impolitical, I said, well, in order to do that, we should just not schedule books as fast as we do. We should just, when we start a new book, we should just have a couple of issues in the can. Well, at a place like, yeah, I know, that sounds reasonable, doesn't it? It also sounds very expensive, and it is. Making comic books and paying people, which you really should do, it's a very expensive proposition. I have had major financial people who wanted to fund some comics activity, more than one, maybe more than 5 or 10. Look at the books as I gave it to them. I said, well, this is how your expenses are going to look. And they went, I'm out of here. I'm leaving. I'm not only leaving this restaurant, I'm leaving America. It's very expensive. Making comics, very time consuming, very costly. Everybody who's in the business is insane, which explains a lot.
It's a brain. I refer to it as a brain disease. The comics brain disease. It's a calling, but it's also it's a compulsion, I think, too.
It is. Absolutely. And it was from the beginning. The guys who started the comic book business were fans of comic strips and of science fiction and other related media. They all got in the same way we all got in, and we all is at least 3 generations, and not counting the first 2.
We're going to get into a bunch of crazy stuff about that. Let's talk about the book first.
You don't want to start. You don't want to start with the founding of the comic book industry, Bob. That doesn't appeal to you.
Howard's not here. We don't have to get that.
No,
he did send his love. I did talk to him this weekend. Told him you were going to be here. Said, tell my nephew I appreciate him. And
thank you for passing that along.
Nephew.
Well, listen. Howard can have as many nephews as he wants.
He has a few. And two. Jed's one of the nephews as well.
Right? He was excited that
okay.
Jed was going to be here as well. So pass that along to Jed that he says hi.
I certainly will.
So Free Planet, written by Aubrey Sitterson and co-created and art by Jed Dougherty, colors by Vittoria Estone. I think I said that wrong, but and letters by Taylor Esposito, who I love Taylor. Okay, tell us about this. Tell us what this is. I mean,
Sure,
I've read the first 4 issues and I love it.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you,
enthralled. I'm looking forward to the next 7 to 10 or however many more we can go. But what is it?
It's a geopolitical space opera. That's the top line, right? It's a big, sprawling future history of the first completely free planet in human history. They've just won their Revolutionary War. It was a grueling 3-year conflict, and it was fought against a massive corporate-dominated oligarchy with tendrils stretching out throughout the galaxy. Their planet is the only place you can find a uniquely potent fuel source, which has guaranteed their independence, but has also made them a target of multiple galactic superpowers. And defending the planet are those folks right there on the cover. It's the Freedom Guard. They're all revolutionary heroes. They fought in the war. They're deeply committed to the dream. But Mike, Bob, just like everybody in this great nation of ours, they all have completely different ideas about what complete freedom actually entails. And that's what drives everything in the book. All of the interpersonal drama, all the big sci-fi military action, and all of the complex geopolitical maneuvering. It's a holistic approach to the page. I'm glad that we already brought up Howard because we are very much working in his shadow here. Jed Dougherty was one of Howard's assistants. That's how I first met him. And we very much aspire to kind of the Chekinian approach to comics, right? Which centers, and Mike's laughing, but he knows I'm right. It centers the page as the foremost and foundational element of comic storytelling. It's not an assemblage of panels. It is a collection of pages. There are there's a ton of spreads. There are charts and graphs, there are maps, there are infographics, there it is, the Chekinian approach. All of it integrated into the pages, right? These are not like separate editorial pages with pie charts on them. All of these kind of metatextual elements are worked into the pages, which I think provides a really distinct feel and effect for the book. I can keep going. Do you want me to?
Dense. No,
it's dense, baby. It's dense. I try not to say dense. I try and say
I'm going to say
enveloping.
I'm going to tell you something. There are multiple ways to read this book, and I have done it multiple ways. You can read it like a regular comic book. You can read it and just go through the images and the word balloons and the important things. But there's an entire wealth of knowledge that's also on the page for you to consume at your will. And I think that's one of the successes of what you guys have done here, because while there's a lot of information and all of that holistic thing you're talking about, it is at the will of the reader and consumer to take what they want. And there's so many different avenues to take from it. Like I said, I've done it multiple ways. I've read through every single line and every single piece of information that you're giving us, which is like, this has been a long time in planning for me, just seeing that. But I've also done it at a much higher superficial layer where I've just read the action through or read the interpersonal things that were going on, because those are tremendously rich and deep.
Well, it's when you pick up the old comic book editor's device, and there's hardly an older comic book editor than me, of just taking the artwork and figuring out the story from the unlettered pages while they're upside down on somebody else's desk. And every person I know who spent any serious time editing comics, just about everybody has developed that technique. When Shaken, when Shaken started work on Flag, when we started work on Flag, we, meaning First Comics, but also the rest of the publishers, were still using ad flats, which means the advertising and the filler material was always on the same page in every book. And in order to do that, the origami of printing demands that those pages are in certain places. So whenever we'd start a new project, I would go over with the talent exactly where those pages are, so they would know whether they're working on the left-hand side page, right-hand side page, where they can put in the spreads. And I mentioned that to Howard. He says, "It doesn't matter, forget it." Okay, why? And I'd known Howard for years by this point. He says, "So I don't pay attention to that. Every page is separate." And I learned a lesson. I went back and looked at a lot of Howard's earliest stuff, which Marvel just, I think today or tomorrow, is reprinting now, I guess through Fancy Graphics. And he's right. That's how he works, and that's how he tells the story, and that's very different from some storytellers. Not all, but some.
I'll go further. I'll say it's very different from the vast majority of contemporary storytellers.
I think that's true.
I think it's rare. I mean, I think it's exceedingly rare. And I know for my part, you know, the way that I'm writing Free Planet is wholly different than how I've written anything else prior. And it's tied up with exactly what we're discussing, which is approaching it, you know, for a confluence of reasons, right? I think a big one is just the impulse and the desire for comics to be seen as literature, right?
Mm-hmm.
In concert with this kind of aspiration to move into film and television that exists with a lot of my contemporaries and my peers, has resulted in the de rigueur approach for comics consisting of a very story-centric methodology, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say that comics shouldn't have stories. Of course, comics should have stories, but because of the two things I mentioned, as well as the assembly line nature of comics production that dominates the industry and has for the entirety of its existence, you know, the way that most people think about stories is, comics is, well, first you come up with a story, and, you know, you do the Bob McKee checklist and your acts and your character arcs. So you get all that stuff in order, and then you break that out into 4 or 5 or 6 issues, and then you break that down into 20 pages, and then you break that down into an average of 4.5 panels. And that's a really great way to provide a relatively high quality floor, but you end up bumping your head on the ceiling very quickly, because what you're ideating isn't a comic book. What you're ideating is a story. What you're ideating is a screenplay or a teleplay that you're trying to hammer into the shape of a comic book. And to avoid doing that, to break myself of that habit, for Free Planet, and this is the first time I've done, actually that's not true, I did a little bit on Jed and my Archie work as kind of like a test run for this kind of approach. I do thumbnails, and I'd done thumbnails previously, but I'd always done thumbnails after I scripted, which is insufficient, right? Like that's good to identify some like major problems if, say, you're asking for something that isn't technically possible on the page, but it does nothing to ensure that what you're writing is first and foremost a visual artifact, that it's an art object, that it functions as something that people want to hold in their hands. And so when I do thumbnails now, I do it prior to scripting. I have, you know, I know broadly what needs to take place in each issue, just due to the dictates of our soap opera drama, as well as kind of these big geopolitical maneuvering things. But I don't get locked into, okay, well, 3 pages for this and 4 pages for that. I avoid that by doing thumbnails prior to scripting, right? And this way, before I actually start saying page 1, panel 1, I know that that page is going to have something tremendous and visually arresting on it, right? And it's, as a result, I've really been leaning on spreads increasingly as we move along, because why wouldn't I? Right? Like if the fundamental storytelling unit is a page, even if you're having discrete left and right pages, those two things are appreciated instantaneously and simultaneously upon turning the page and being confronted by it. And so using this approach has been transformative for me in terms of my comics writing, and Free Planet is the result.
About every third SquadCast, I say to folks, and you, those of you who know, can sing along with me. Will Eisner said, you have to give people a reason to turn every page. You have to pace it out so that they want to turn the page. Now, that's not necessarily a 100% physical thing. You can do that emotionally and probably do it better emotionally, but it's also physical because comics is first and foremost a visual storytelling medium. It is not like movies. Some comics can be made into good movies, but you toss them out. You toss out the comic book rules and you put in movie rules. Comics is a unique medium onto itself, and it's annoying that it started out as a medium for children, but I like that part because get them while they're young. We can do adult things as we've seen throughout the rest of the world, and now over the last couple of decades, we're beginning to do here.
One of the things I like so much about this book is it is bold. It is it is challenging. The Jed's art is phenomenal, so please tell him I said that.
He's the best.
It is the best work he's ever done, and I don't mean that not. It was done fantastic work, but this is
it feels like a real step forward.
Award worthy, is what I'll say.
I don't want to jinx it, but I agree, sir.
I get that.
It is, but it's great the way you kind of described it earlier on, where you said it's this geopolitical space opera. But those people on that first cover that we talked about, these people, they are intriguing in every way, every one of them. I want to talk just a minute about, there's two characters who are very, very tied to a church. What inspired you to bring those characters in and have them be as the certain levels of devoutness that they have? They're not the same levels of devoutness. Like, as you were developing those characters, what did you think about? How did that work for you?
So I did an extensive amount of research for Free Planet, and that's another big transformative thing for me as well. And that, and this like holistic approach and considering everything and thinking about and overthinking everything. This grew out of Jed and my prior work. We did Savage Hearts together at Dark Horse, and I'm very proud of the work. It's beautiful and fun, and we had a blast doing it. But in the course of doing, it's set in a jungle, and Jed at one point called me and said, "Well, what's the flora like in this jungle? What kind of plants are they?" And I said, "Jed, I don't fucking know." Why are you asking me this? I said, "I don't know, man." And then we started talking, and he's like, "Well, we need to figure it out because there's plants on every page." And I was like, "Okay, well, it's also filled with dinosaurs, so I guess prehistoric." And so then we did some digging around, and we found some ferns and some conifers and some stuff for him to riff and build on. But the fact that he came to me with that question and I didn't have an answer for him shamed me. I felt ashamed.
Absolutely.
I felt ashamed, right?
Absolutely.
Because this is labor and work and thought that I'm expecting Jed to do that I have given not an ounce of consideration toward, right? And Free Planet, I endeavored to change that. Free Planet, I wanted to consider everything. We wanted this to be a sophisticated, complex, challenging work. And in order to do that, I couldn't just rely, as I have and many of my peers and contemporaries do, on research. I'm doing scare quotes that consists of other fiction, right? Watching
Right.
TV, watching movies, reading novels, reading other comics. That's not research. These are not nutrient dense things to be consuming, right? Research is nonfiction prose, because that's how you get the most informational density. Prose, nonfiction. And so I've read an immense amount in the years spent developing Free Planet, largely focused on and I am going to answer your question, Bob. It's always a journey
That's
with
fine.
me.
That's good.
We'll we'll get back around to it. Don't worry, it's coming.
I'm loving it.
I read a ton of, doorstop poems, largely focused on real world revolutions and civil wars of the 20th century. And there were certain things that were recurrent, that came up all the time. And we can talk about more of them, but one of them, probably obviously at this point, is religion. Religion is a crucial, if you're talking about revolutions, if you're talking about civil wars, the role played by religion, and it's different, right? Depending on the context and which instance and historical event we're talking about, but religion is a crucial component of that. And I think that also, in the contemporary, especially the US context, it's easy to see religion as purely a reactionary force, but viewing religion as inherently a reactionary force is ahistorical. It's just not true, right? And this is one of the joys of doing something like Free Planet, in that everything in it is informed by this real world research that I've done, but by setting it in the far, 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 far distant science fiction future and changing things and combining them and splitting them apart, we can hopefully break free of some of these preconceived notions about what role a deeply religious person might play in a, liberty and equality based revolution.
And there are different types of deeply religious people. I would go so far as to say no two are alike.
And
It's a
these
very
two are not.
complicated role. Yeah.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, and that's part of the idea with these two characters, is that they are both ostensibly of the same religion, but post schism from slightly different sects. Everybody else sees them as largely the same, but to the two of them, their religions couldn't be more, their interpretations of the same religion couldn't be more different. And it allows us a on-ramp to discuss and explore, ideas like the role of religion in revolutions, and the role of religion in nation building and establishing not just a new government, but a new culture, right? As well as kind of headier theological issues circling around things like free will and predestination, which, are of vital import if what you're aiming to do is an extended rumination on freedom, which is what Free Planet is at its core.
That's right. That's right. It's an interesting standard because everybody is going to bring their thoughts to the table, but by everybody, I mean the readers are all going to, and they're going to interpret it out of their experiences or against their experiences. They can be in rebellion, and it's not a matter of who's right and who's wrong, because you're not writing gospel, you're writing fiction. And it's sort of kind of a cautionary predictive fiction at that. So, and religion is really good about telling you what you should do to avoid or create certain futures. We make rocket ships. you know,
So
that's our future.
I want to talk about another thing. Like, you just talked about all of the things you did to prepare for what there's there. When The other thing that I find super interesting about this, and kind of talking about Jeddah here, is that the characters are all significantly different in terms of their physical appearance. What, if any, did you contribute to that? And how much of that is how did Jed go about, if you can share, how did he go about developing the physical visual representation of these characters?
It's a great question, and I mean, I would, and I will answer it. And I'm not punting, but just as a side note, I really encourage people to go to Jed's Patreon. It's Jeb Riodo,
Sure.
JEBRIODO. He has been posting a lot of his early design work focused specifically on the core cast, and so you can actually see his early steps there. You know, in terms of building out this core cast, that was really the beginning of Free Planet, right? Before we had any of this complex narrative and multiple intergalactic societies and alien races, before we had any of that stuff, it started from a place of, okay, it's space Venezuela. It's it's defended by a team of people, right? Because, you know, if we're talking about a revolution, if we're talking about a post-revolution society, some of the most prominent actors, if not all of the prominent actors, are bound to be military, right? They're bound to be people who actually participated in this revolution. And so we knew it was a military story. We knew that it was going to be defending this mono commodity planet with a very in-demand resource, kind of surrounded on all sides by competing hegemonies, right? We knew that was going to be the structure. And we wanted to build the narrative around a cast that provided opportunities to explore conflicting ideas about not only freedom, but the sacrifices it requires, the discipline that it necessitates, and the authority that kind of arises in its absence. And so to do that, we came up with, you know, I had a list of real world revolution and civil war archetypes, right? And then I had a list of sci-fi archetypes, and we started piecing them together, and we started combining them, right? And that was how we kind of assembled the start of this cast, right? There is the terrorist / freedom fighter. There is the indigenous guerrilla fighter. There is the child of privilege who is a brilliant tactician, right? There's the loyal soldier who follows orders and views that as a source of freedom, right? And we came up with these archetypes, and I immediately started kind of drawing the web of connections, right? Because I think that any good soap opera, everybody needs to be connected to and in disagreement with everyone else, right? And so we started constructing this web, and as I did that, Jed moved into these character designs, and it's a testament to Jed's strengths in design, not just characters, but in all things. And he's had to design an immense amount for this series. That there wasn't a whole lot of back and forth, right? Most of the refinement was just kind of on his side in terms of like, oh, well, the robot, maybe like the antenna things are a little shorter, and we move the eyes a little bit to make them more expensive, things like that. The designs for the characters themselves mostly sprung forth from Jed's forehead fully formed. It was an impressive thing to watch.
It is. I mean, they're amazing. I'm scrolling through the at the end of issue 1. There's the This Year in Free Planet kind of pages, which kind of like let you through there, and just to see them all there. It's excellent. And I've read Free Planet 4, which comes out tomorrow, right? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And everything gets blown on its head.
We attempt to do that every issue, if I'm being honest with you. It's an ongoing series. Spoiler alert, everything gets blown on its head.
Well, I mean, it is what I love about it is that there's a massive change in the story.
Oh, yeah.
That is not a literal explosion.
Yeah. But it's huge, and I'm really I'm delighted that you recognize what a big deal that is, Bob. Because I think that Careful reading will make it clear, but not everybody's as careful a reader as you are. So thank you for that.
I think you do a good job of bringing the attention to it. No, you did that. I mean, I know that is some tough work in what you did, what the big event is that happens in this issue, and how it doesn't really build. It's an explosion, but not literal. And but you did a good job of calling of giving it its significance. But as I said, as I'm trying to say here, like, this is the kind of there's so I really do I love this book a lot. Now I know I'm saying that, but
thank you, Bob.
It's so smartly crafted in every discipline. The lettering is excellent. The colors are perfect. The designs, the way that you craft the story of these characters and bring them together, it's just wonderful. And I'm excited that there's issue 10 being worked on. Because that's one of the biggest things, one of the hardest things about, and as Mike and I were talking before we brought you in, it's that, how do we keep making good new comics? How do we get people to keep buying them and getting people to get invested in them? And there's such a lot more than there used to be, and there's not a lot of corporate support for comics in any, doesn't matter, it could be Disney and Marvel and DC, and they're still not supporting their comics.
They're good at that.
Well, can you imagine the smaller companies? And this is you guys are doing this image series. This is a lot of you on it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that and I applaud it. How much of this is inspired by the world you see, or the world we're living in? Was it something that was the world we're living in, something that said, I need to tell this story this way. I need to explore these themes, or was it something that just had already there? How timely is it for you?
I think it's timely, but not topical.
Okay.
How about that?
That's fair.
That's good.
It's good.
That's
huh?
a good line.
Right off the top of my dome, man.
Oh man, I'm going to steal that from you. That's
You can
really
use it.
good.
It's yours. No, but
I agree with you. I agree with you. It is exactly
you, Bob.
that.
Yeah, it's not topical. It's informed by, one of the biggest influence on Free Planet is the Spanish Civil War, the Russian Revolution, the history of Cuba, the Chinese Revolution, right? I mentioned like Venezuela is one of the more topical, like the more recent influences, right? Most of them go further back. And, so it's not a topical book. But I do think that it's timely because these issues are always timely, like especially in the US context, which we are, right? Freedom is a concept that is baked into our national myth. It is baked in, from the youngest age. Everything revolves around freedom. It's why we rebelled against England. It's why we have the government we have. It's why we wave the flag. It's why we celebrate on July 4th. Freedom, freedom, freedom. And I think that is, for me, and I think most people, a constant and pressing concern. And I think what's unique and interesting about freedom, and something that I keep front of mind whenever I'm working on Free Planet, is that freedom is a nonpartisan ideal, right? Like, while the word freedom and sometimes the iconography and how it's deployed can be and certainly has been used to partisan ends, everybody up and down the political spectrum in this country, if you asked them, are you in support of freedom? The answer is going to be yes, right? It's how that's expressed and what that looks like and what sacrifices are acceptable. That's where things start to get kind of sticky. So, I think, to my mind, one of the strengths of Free Planet is that it isn't topical, right? If we had done a story tried to explore the same things set in a contemporary environment, right? With, or even an existing historical environment, right? People would bring to it so many preconceived notions about every government entity we depicted,
Right.
law enforcement, military, religion. We couldn't do anything without people having a full suite of ideas about how those elements should be interpreted and the value judgments that they bring to them. By saying things so far in the future, we free ourselves of that and instead get to make something. I think this is the fun paradox and beauty of working in fiction, right? Is that by making things so specific, they attain a certain universality, because people are able to lose themselves in the specificity of the world that you're creating and the logic that it contains, right? So, most of the inspiration for Free Planet is more historical stuff. Though in issue 4, I'm sure, Bob, you picked up, so this isn't a spoiler really, it's in all the preview pages. There's an insurrection. There's a violent insurrection in the Capitol with counter-revolutionary landowners attacking the Capitol building. It would be disingenuous for me to say that I wasn't thinking about certain semi-recent events in our own country's history when working on that. Similarly,
just wait. It could happen in New York next year. New York City next year. It could happen.
I mean, it could happen anywhere, it could happen anywhere is the thing. And we, that was certainly something I kept in the front of my mind while working on that sequence. Similarly, the Canadian caravan. Do you remember that? The big truck driver caravan in Canada. I thought about that a lot too, right? And because the insurrection in issue 4 begins as a caravan moving across Lutheria towards the capital city, So, I do try and draft off of some topical stuff here and there, but I generally avoid it because I don't want the story to feel dated. I don't, and I think that there is.
I get that.
There, coming into Free Planet, I had done political work prior. You showed some of it on the intro sequence. Beef Bros is a really good example. Beef Bros is a book I love, but Beef Bros is agitprop. Beef Bros is propaganda, and there's nothing wrong with that. But Beef Bros is preaching to the choir. It's telling people who agree with me exactly what they want to hear and delivering a funny story along the way. But there's nothing particularly challenging about Beef Bros, right? I think that most political comics work, or political fiction of any type, falls into one or two categories: agitprop or direct metaphor, right? And if you're doing direct metaphor, that's all fine and good, but it's limited, right? Because again, you're telling people what they want to, you're preaching to the choir, you're telling people what they want to hear, and you're limiting yourself to interpreting and recontextualizing already existing things, right? We wanted to do something else with Free Planet. We wanted to have a deeper, richer rumination, right? Such as you might find in literature, right? And because for as good as a story consisting of a direct metaphor might be, it's not literature. It's a parable, right? It's not. It doesn't function the same way that we think of literature as working, right? A parable, a direct metaphor. These are riddles for readers to figure out. Well, this, Snowball is Trotsky, and this is the Russian Revolution, and that's what Animal Farm means. And now I understand, right? That's not how literature works. Literature is more complex than that. Literature doesn't provide answers. Literature provokes rumination and thought and discussion. And I think that as a goal is not compatible with leaning heavily upon topical and contemporary events.
You and I could have a fascinating dinner just talking agitprop.
Send me the invite, man. Let's go.
Because that's a deep part of my background, and actually the fun part about it. But I must ask you a question that I don't think I've asked on the SquadCast certainly before. What of your personal experiences have you drawn from for this book, for this story?
Oh, that's interesting. Personal experience is very little. I didn't serve in the military. I've never worked in the
Mhm.
government. These are foreign things to me, right? And that's why research and I spent a lot of time talking to service members.
Mhm.
Actually, that was a big part of it. I spent a lot of time talking to both or to officers, non-commissioned officers, and enlisted service members because of the complexities of those relationships are really important in real world revolutions. But in terms of like my actual experiences, very little. What is me and what does feel very personal to me about Free Planet are these kind of individual philosophical, these gnawing philosophical quandaries that all of our cast has, right? One of the Free Planet hallmarks is, and it grew out of, I love Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley is one of, if not my favorite writer, and something that his characters do, especially in like Point Counterpoint is my favorite of his. Something that his characters do, he'll have a cast of characters and they all have very distinct worldviews and ardently held opinions about everything. And they love discussing it. And Huxley is confident enough in his prose to let a narrative grind to a halt for a character to just tell you a thing, for a character to
Yeah.
just tell you exactly what they're thinking and it's beautiful prose. It has to be well written, right? And that's something I really wanted to pull from and find a way to incorporate into Free Planet. And we do it through these very frequent, like big headshot and then a ton of text next to them with a character looking directly at you, just telling you exactly what they think about a thing. And for me, that's cathartic because as different as all of the characters in Free Planet are, and they are really distinct. I agree with all of them depending on the time of day, the issue that we're discussing, the specifics of whatever context, right? I don't find any of the characters to be unreasonable or foolish or frivolous. And that's that's the Aubrey personal experience that you see on the page in Free Planet is these are the monologues, right? These deep kind of thoughtful monologues digging into the thorny question of freedom.
Okay, so a lot of folks don't like to be lectured to or proselytized to, particularly right now, because everybody's doing it because we have no other choice. That's how we make it through the day. What do you say to those people who might read you but are afraid that you're just going to be lecturing them?
That's a great question. I think that Free Planet, because so to be clear, every character in Free Planet gives a lecture. They absolutely do, right? Like there's no getting around that. But again, they all disagree with each other. I challenge someone to figure out to nail down what exactly Free Planet is saying, because Free Planet's not saying any one thing, right? Again, it's
That's true.
what's more important than a friend of mine, Daniel Friedman. He's a brilliant comics writer himself. He asked me, he had read like the first issue or two, and he was like, "Hey, do you ever provide answers?" I was like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, like, do you ever say like this is how a society should be structured, and this is what would be a better government and way for people to organize themselves?" And I say, "Oh no, that's that's completely at odds with what Free Planet is and how it's meant to function." And I spent a lot, again, freedom is a thing that appeals to people up and down the political spectrum. And my politics having been so public for such a long time and so on the surface of something like Beef Bros, it was really important to me that Free Planet appeal to folks outside of my very specific political circle and window, and we do that again through abstraction and pushing everything into the far future. So, while you might have some characters lecturing you, Free Planet never lectures you. Free Planet, the story, doesn't lecture you, because Free Planet, the story, doesn't know what it thinks. And that's, to me, what's most exciting and interesting about it.
That's very good. That's very well reasoned. From my own experience, and I've been a very political animal, still am. People don't form societies or new cultures or new structures for everybody to live. Change is much more incremental than that. And anybody who says, well, what is your plan for let's go Stalin here. What is your 5-year plan for changing the nation? There's a lot of wishing going on to reply to that, because it's organic. Our job, and anybody's job who wants to influence and feels passionately about our society, our job is to start that snowball at the top of the mountain. We have to realize we can't control it. There are things we can do about it. We can pick the mountain, we can pick the snow, and you can kind of watch for the path. But at the end of the day, at the bottom of that mountain, there's going to be one big snowball, and you don't know what it's going to look like.
Yep.
That's right. It's one of the, and honestly, it's one of, so an acknowledgement of that is that informed the way that Free Planet is structured, right? In that they've just won a revolution and they are starting from scratch, right? And this is another thing that Spanish Civil War was really influential, right? Because even though it wasn't technically a revolution, although it might have been seen as one if maybe a different faction had won, right? There were periods during the Spanish Civil War, and there were regions of the country that were controlled by anarchist idealists that did attempt to build a new society and restructure the world as they knew it into something that aligned more definitively with their ideology and the way that they saw the world around them and the future that they wanted to build. And constructing a scenario in which that was a viable thing was very much a concern with how we developed Free Planet.
Absolutely. I'm reminded that before Mussolini invented contemporary fascism, he was an anarchist who translated Peter Kropotkin's work into Italian. The Abraham Lincoln Brigade was on the list of troubled organizations that they gave you at your draft physicals back in the day. They gave me at my draft physicals back in the day and asked you, like, which of these organizations that we all know went out of business decades ago are you a member of? Okay, once you get over that, I actually checked off the Abraham Lincoln Brigade. And the guy who was head of security, and I spent 5 days with him in my last physical, the guy who was head of security said, Abraham Lincoln Brigade, what's that? And I told him what it was. And he says, but that was Spain, that was the 30s. And I says, yeah, but Franco's still in power.
Yeah.
And, oh, yeah, you could see the guy's face change totally. I mean, he was like a major in the army, and I respect the army. I respect our armed forces. I respect everything, but it's the bureaucracy, not the armed forces, that's the problem. He paid his dues to get to where he is, and he understood what I was talking about. He saw the threat. He saw the idea of the threat. If it's still there, it could happen.
I want to take a quick second and leave Free Planet for a minute because we have you here, and I want to do that.
Sure.
What inspired you to work in this medium? You've been working in this medium for 20 years now.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, we opened with that brain disease. We discussed we discussed that right up the top. I thought brain disease, incurable brain disease.
Yeah.
So aside from that, like what's the origins of the brain disease? So I've thought about this a lot, right? And I think for like a lot of people, the reason that you come to comics isn't necessarily the reason that you fall in love with and you stay with comics, right?
Sure.
For me, initially, comics struck me as a visual storytelling medium that I could wrap my arms around, right? Making a movie, making TV shows, that never really appealed to me. And I don't really know why, but I think it has something to do with the bigness of it. And the number of people involved and the bureaucracy that grows out of that is necessitated by the number of people involved and the amount of money involved. The freedom, not to bring us back to freedom again, but the freedom contained within comics, and the freedom that comics offers people is unparalleled, right? For a visual medium. And that was the big appeal to me. And, just there being so much work that meant so much to me. And truthfully, moving to New York City at 18 years of age, and then all of a sudden being confronted with so many comic shops with such density, which I never had when I was growing up, it made it easy. Say again.
Where'd you grow up?
Richmond, Virginia. And so we had comic shops, but I was out in the exurbs.
It's different.
And
sure.
Yeah, man, like I didn't have any way to get to them, right? Like, so for the first time, like having so many shops in proximity allowed me to really fall down the rabbit hole. What's kept me interested in comics, and what continues to make me more excited about comics than I've ever been, because I've started to, in the past few years, I've really started to wrap my brain around this, is that comics is a fundamentally distinct and different medium that I don't think we've fully plumbed its depths yet. I don't think, and I think there are a lot of structural reasons behind this, a lot of industry reasons, but I don't think we've really uncovered everything that comics can do. Comics is an expansive medium, and not only have we not uncovered everything that comics can do, we haven't even developed the language to fully discuss and analyze and describe what comics can do, because it's a hybrid form, but it's also something else. It's pictures and images, but it's also design. It's also what we're talking about earlier. It's the Chekinian approach, right? It's viewing comics as an assemblage of pages, as things that are self-sufficient and each page should function as an art object and something for readers to be overwhelmed by and to study and to take in and absorb. And the way you read comics, like, we don't even really know. It's like we don't really understand how people process and parse comics, and there's a lot of theories about it, right?
I do. I can tell you, I can do it 8 different ways.
That's the thing. You mentioned that at the top of the thing, exactly, because good comics done well, and comics using the entirety of this very complex visual language that we have to utilize and pull from. They can be approached in a number of different ways, as Bob said, that it can be choose your own adventure, and you can choose to spend time with things differently and return to them. And this is significant to me because the thesis statement for Free Planet, outside of from a formal level, right? The formal thesis statement for Free Planet is to make something that functions as literature and art object. And that's significant to me because I think that comics are the only medium that can be both, right? A novel is never going to be an art object, right? Like, maybe the cover is really nice and it's good to look at. It's not quite the same thing as an art object.
It'll change for the next printing.
Say again?
It'll be changed for the next printing.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's not vital. It's not vital.
That's exactly right. And a statue is never going to be literature. It just doesn't function in the same way. It can be beautiful, it can be thought provoking, it can be art, but it's not literature. And I think that comics has this unique opportunity as the medium to produce work that scratches all these itches, right? In a way, and allows the reader the freedom and the power to really dig in and explore big ideas in the way that typically you only find in literature, right? Comics like novels are a cold medium. They're an exceptionally cold medium. They're cold. They're colder than prose, I think, even because of the degree of work that readers have to do in order to actually understand and build the narrative, right? There's the old Scott McCloud thing about like all the magic happening in the
Right.
gutters, right?
Right.
And that's true, and I think that it's the possibilities of comics. It's these untapped possibilities of comics that continue to excite me about them.
I have worked in most all media that's out there, at least since my birth. And okay, granted, I will concede I am a comics fan, but I have never seen a storytelling medium that is as infinite, that can be as infinite as the imaginations of those who participate. Not just the storytellers, but the readers as well. We're playing to their imagination, we're playing to their sense of wonder. And you can tell human stories, important human stories, through those vehicles. And you can't really get that in prose. You certainly don't get it from statues, although, I dig statues. I dig architecture. You can get it from architecture, but it's very subtle. That's why I love the medium, because it cannot contain any one person's imagination. We can do anything if we put our minds to it. We can tell any type of story.
And I think that, Mike, I think that extends beyond just type of story, though, right? I think it extends to, and I think crucially extends to how we're choosing to tell these stories, because I think that one of the things that is so fundamentally important about this, like the Chekinian idea of the page as the foundational storytelling unit, is that even if it's a rigid grid, even if you've got Watchmen 9-panel grid on the page, absolutely exactly zero readers are confronted with that page and read it perfectly sequentially. It just doesn't happen, right? They've done extensive eye tracking. Exactly. They've done extensive eye tracking tests, even just on prose, and people's eyes ping pong all over the place. What does that mean? That means that you're taking in the entire page at one time. And therefore, it's incumbent upon comics creators to create pages that consider that. Right. And for me, what that means is freeing ourselves from a reliance on grids. Again, grids are great for the same reason that a story-centric approach to writing comics is great, because they facilitate faster, more consistent production. They're a great tool for assembly line comics. There's nothing wrong with grids, but grids used comics consisting exclusively of grids leave so much on the table. It's specifically in terms of a reader's ability to absorb and interpret multiple visual elements simultaneously, and what's more, draw connections between them. Right? That's the source. That's the source and the kind of the core of all human intelligence is pattern recognition and drawing connections and finding meaning where there wasn't meaning previously, meaning that then becomes more potent for them having discovered it themselves. So in the context of Free Planet, what does that mean? That means that we'll have a single page where there will be some panels of soap opera drama, but then there's also some charts on grain and orcalium production and imports and exports. And then there's also a separate third thread of big, dense historical captions talking about elements that are either contextually related or thematically related to what's happening on the page, such that you have these 3 elements on every single page that the reader can then find their connections for, which allows us to pack in like far more information that we would be able to otherwise, because we're relying on the reader to do the heavy lifting of the storytelling based on proximity. And that's an amazing tool that comics has a monopoly on, right? Film and television, it's linear. You're only seeing the one frame at a time that you're meant to be seeing. Literature is not prose is not interpreted in the same way. Again, it's linear. You can go back and you can check things out, but you're never seeing things juxtaposed and
It also doesn't
imbuing
have
one another with meaning based on proximity.
prose also doesn't have the easy thumbnails to go back to. Like, for example, if you want to go back in a comic, it's very easy to find where you want to go. Try and go
100%.
back a half a chapter in a prose and find where you want to go back.
It's a nightmare. I mean,
So,
and this
but
is
along the line of the
ahead.
page, I want to get a couple of things. Like, so I'm thinking about there is a particular use of the 9-panel grid that is definitely my favorite, but it's my favorite for this reason. And it's in Legion of Superheroes 5 years later. Keith Giffen and run there. He used a lot of 9-panel grids on a lot of pages and a lot of different ones. But what always struck me about that was that each panel, it was not a series, it was not a linear series of panels. Each panel was its own page almost. And it would explode. You could explode through it. It was so deep and like it was a window into a whole stuff, the whole that happened behind it. So each panel was that, and so be able to, I can see why you didn't need to read them sequentially, because that's not what it was. It wasn't about that. It was like, here's a whole lot of shit that's happening, and you can figure out, like, there's again the concept of things in the gutters. Like, what's going on just past this panel because you can see it. And so that kind of thing is exactly what I think what you're talking about.
100%.
Even using a rigid grid just to give you each panel is just a window into a scene that you can then explore, with your own mind. And the other thing that was interesting is along this Chakanian approach is also the Larsenian approach, because we talked to Eric Larson, and we said, like, well, what do you do? He's like, well, I come down every day and there's a blank piece of paper and I draw a page, and that's what he does. There's no script. There's no script. School. I draw what's in what I want to put on that page, and so that's an interesting concept. Like, because then you've done that page. That's your goal for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually,
there's something that we can do, that we do all the time, sometimes unknowingly, that is very difficult, if not impossible, to do in other storytelling media. We control time. Anybody can say, well, 1 month later, or do a flashback and make it look like a flashback. You can do that in any medium. But we could show somebody's thought process that lasts in real time for a second. But in order to read it and to explain it in an entertaining manner, it's going to take several panels, if not pages. We can stretch that second into an hour if we wanted to, and if we felt that necessary. And you can't get away with that so easily in other media. And timing, as any good broadcaster will tell you, is the essence of everything.
I mean, I think this is yet another example of how comics has been done a dramatic disservice by a commitment to screenplay and teleplay pacing, right? When you have comics, as a lot of contemporary comics are, that function more or less like storyboards, right? Which is to say, just sequential panels, just panels showing actions and people saying things in them in the way that they would as if it were a teleplay, you leave these tools on the table, right?
Right.
If you're writing a comic or drawing a comic with that kind of pacing, you don't have the freedom to do that kind of stuff, Mike. And that's why we've seen in the past 20 years or so people move away from word balloons, or not word balloons, thought balloons, right? Because thought balloons do not fit in with a screenplay approach to comics. Because like, how does it work? What's the timing, right? It just, the pacing gets all off. And comics has the freedom to do stuff like that, to say, no, Spider-Man's going to have a full monologue in his head while he's punching the Rhino, right? Like comics,
that's right.
Comics can do that, and done. Of course, if it's done poorly, it's terrible. That's true of anything. But that is a technique it's been left on the floor for decades now. And I think that it aligns closely with something I was thinking about while Bob was talking. Is comics, a real strength of comics is dream logic, right? Like I think a lot about Charles Burns's work. Whenever I read it, it really knocks me on my ass. It makes me feel inadequate. It makes me feel like I'm not trying hard enough, right? Because one of the things that Charles Burns's work does that's so impressive to me is that he will do exactly very similar to what you're talking about, Bob. Is he'll give you images and it'll be a grid, but the images aren't obvious. Like the connection between them isn't obvious. Right. And far from, rather than people being put off, rather than as a reader being put off by that or confused or just not wanting to deal with it, instinctively, without even thinking about it, I start to look for those connections and I create those connections on my own. And, that is, like you're talking about, Mike, that is a opportunity to kind of divorce ourselves from this linear time scheme that mediums like film and television are shackled to, and we don't have to be.
The operative phrase for me in doing comics that I relay to my coworkers is, we can do anything as long as we pull it off. As long as there's a story there, as long as it advances the story or adds to the characterization or creates a reality with which the reader had not been previously familiar, we can do anything. You can't do that in movies. You can't do that in television. People will look at that, well, at least now, people will look at that stuff and go, oh, that's phony. Now, I qualified that because with AI, I think we're entering into a world where nobody's going to believe anything. I mean, that's my greatest fear. It's like, oh, that's AI. And 2 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, I would show somebody a politically oriented photograph, and they will say, "Oh no, that's AI." Well, no, actually, it's not. But I understand why they feel that way.
I want to bring that up. I actually saw it earlier today. I wondered if we would get into this. It's very interesting. I saw a commercial today, and it's for a new Samsung home appliance, and it is a washer and dryer. It's a clothes washer and dryer. One appliance. You put the clothes in, it washes it, and then it dries it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting technology. I like the concept, but it is labeled as AI driven. I don't understand what is.
Whose clothes are you washing?
I'm not.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, that's the point, right? Like that's the point of why it struck me, because it's like, why do we have to label it this way? Because you're right. What you said is perfect, because when you label it that way, for a lot of people, they're like, oh, well, that's not real then.
Right. God, we're headed towards like a real nightmare, aren't we? I'm not opposed to AI, except for in the creative arts. Because they steal from us. But in medicine and I guess washer dryers, I mean, I don't know why they say that's AI, but for me, if you say it's AI, I'm going to go, no, I'm in the comic book business. Screw you. But that's stupid, because then I'll take some medicine that wouldn't exist without AI. So fine. You know, we always
we
think
could spend
we're going
hours-
off to hell. I'm sorry.
We could spend hours talking about the poor use of that word, but I want to also, since I have you here, because I don't think I've talked to you since this happened, but this is my favorite Archie book of all time.
Ah!
Hell yeah.
This because I think last time we talked, I think Savage Hearts was just coming out. That's where we were. There's so, you mentioned it earlier, but I feel like that is the prototype for where we are with Free Planet.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
that book was, that issue was the first time that I did layouts before I scripted.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
That was the first one. And you know, I think you can tell if you flip. So for people who aren't aware, Archie versus the World is a. Archie came to me and they said, Aubrey, would you like to do Archie like Archie Fury Road? And I said, of course I would. Thank you. But I was like, you know, car chases are a really difficult proposition in comics, especially if I forget how long I think it was only like 20, 22 pages, something like that. Like, there's not really room to do a meaningful car chase that works, right? And I could get into the formal reasons for that, but if people want to, but it just doesn't work. And I said, so instead, could it be more of like a Archie Fist of the North Star thing? And they said, yeah, sure, that's fine. So that's what we did instead. Because, you know, if you're familiar with Fist of the North Star, it's basically Mad Max meets Bruce Lee anyways. So it was an easy kind of like adjustment to make. But, you know, if you look through Archie versus the World, it's only a one shot. And it consists of vignettes largely constrained to spreads, right? Such that every time you turn the page, you have, you know, if it's not a full spread, it's at least 2 pages that were ideated in consideration of one another, such that there is this kind of holistic sense for every single spread. And that was new for me. It was a new way for me to structure a story. And I loved it because it allowed me to prioritize visual presentation, right? And to give Jed the opportunity to draw the types of pages that I, as a fan and reader, always react most strongly to, right? Which is to say, interesting and expressive page layouts, right? I made that a priority. And in doing that, in saying, okay, well, in this spread, this is the Josie and the Pussycats rocking out in the weird sleazy bar spread, and this is the splash page of Sabrina as like the triple aspect goddess. And by starting from a place of visual set pieces and visual approaches and interesting layouts, and then building the story around that, it actually allowed, you know, rather than, you know, because I say that, even just saying it out loud, it makes it sound like the story was an afterthought, right? And
No.
I don't subscribe to that. You know, like any comic, there's like a dozen things it needs to be a good comic. The order in which you decide upon those doesn't really matter, because the truth of the matter is that they should all be decided on in consideration with one another. They should all be decided on simultaneously, because they all feed into one another. But by giving priority to the visual display, I was able to excise and elide story elements that are not visually interesting, that aren't even particularly necessary, right? Like, and again, it's divorcing ourselves and freeing ourselves from the screenplay approach, where panels and lines of dialogues happen just because that's what would happen if it was being filmed. But with a 20-page Archie Mad Max Fist of the North Star comic, you don't have to worry about any of that. You can just do it and expect. And I've been so encouraged, especially, you know, with Archie versus the World, but especially with Free Planet, I've been so encouraged by how much heavy lifting readers are willing to do. You
That's
don't have to
true.
hold their hand. You don't. You can say, okay, here's a graph, here's a couple captions of, me jabbering about whatever dogma or, historical background, and a close up of a guy talking directly at you about some intense issue, and then like one panel of back and forth. And readers, instead of looking at that and saying, wow, what a disjointed mess, readers will look at that and automatically start to look for and find the connective tissue, right? They create it on their own. And Archie versus the World was absolutely a big step in me figuring out how to do that. Similarly, Archie Judgment Day, which I did with Megan. So Archie versus the World was with Jed Dougherty, but
Right.
Archie Judgment Day, it was with a different artist. It was with Megan Hutchinson. And I talked to her before. I was like, listen, I'm kind of on this trip right now. I'm writing things a little bit differently. Would you mind if I did this approach? And I didn't send her, I don't send people my thumbnails. Those are just for me, right? But my scripts are very, they're very concerned with formal aspects and how big a panel is and where it's placed on the page and what this infographic or the graph is going to look like and things like that. And, overarching page design concerns. And working with a different artist with that approach was also really educational in terms of figuring out how to come up with a visual presentation and then interpret that into a script such that the artist is then has the freedom, then understands what the concept is and what we're trying to get across, but then also has the freedom to improve upon my idea. Because at the end of the day, these people are incredible cartoonists and they're better at
That's
this
right.
than I am, right?
And that's how you create comics. For the record, Archie versus World, great book, wonderful book. Loved the hell out of it. There are a few of these Archie one shots that have absolutely surprised me at how good they were, and therefore I can't say that you surprised me, but you entertained the hell out of me and made me think a little bit about what you can do with the Archie characters. I enjoy the hell out of it. As for the reader doing the heavy lifting, we learned that the hard way, just to go full circle here, on American Flag.
I believe it. I know. So I'll tell you something funny. When I showed, we got the first 5 pages of Free Planet done, and I showed them to Howard. And the first 5 pages do some heavy lifting, right? They establish the world. They give all this background about the Revolutionary War. They introduce this cast of characters with big chunks of dialogue and all. And Howard was really helpful with us figuring out with Taylor the best approach for the lettering aesthetic. Howard was already really helpful with that. And he read the first 5 pages and he called me and he said, you were expecting way too much of your audience. There is no audience for this. No one is going to read. No one can put up. No one is going to have the patience for this. You are another great thing he said to me. He said, you are about that big spread with all the characters. He says, you are presenting archetypes, but no one knows what these archetypes are. And it was great feedback to get from Howard because I am familiar with his history and the context of how much work he did that went underappreciated and under-recognized for the level of thought and care and deliberate choices contained within it. So it actually, far from being discouraging, it was kind of the exact thing that I wanted to hear. And what's been really nice is that I think Howard's wrong. I think we're proving him wrong, man. Which is it's always a treat for Howard to be wrong. That's always something I personally enjoy.
Absolutely. And he uses those same devices in his own work. Let me tell you a story. I know we're running late. Well,
we are.
A quick story. At the Baltimore Comic-Con 3 years ago, give or take, Howard was there. I was there. A whole bunch of people were there. And Howard decided to tell all of us what he wants on his tombstone. This is the middle of the convention floor.
Sure.
And he tells us, and it was very nice, but it was a little long. So I said, Howard, can I make a suggestion? And Howard looks at me and he goes, yeah, you're an editor, of course. That's what you're going to do. Yeah, right. I said, try this out for your tombstone. Howard Chaykin. Am I ahead of my time now? He conceded that point. Howard's a real mensch. And I mean that in every wonderful sense of that word. It's a word that has no English equivalent. He's smarter than he accepts, I think. And I have no right to say that.
Well, that's saying something because he accepts quite a bit. But you're right.
Yes, and he's smarter than that.
You're
And
right.
That's absolutely
You're right.
But he's smarter than that. I have learned so much being his friend for the last 49 years. On Thanksgiving, it'll be 49 years. And his opinions about people's work are always valid. They're not necessarily right because they're opinions and there's no right or wrong with an opinion, but they're valid. So you learn from Howard by shutting up and listening.
I agree.
All right. Issue 4 of Pre-Planet comes out tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes, sir.
If you go into the comment section, you will see a link to Jed's Patreon. Go check that out. This has been wonderful. This has been everything I expected.
Thank you for having
me.
Too
long in coming.
Treat.
Aubrey, I enjoyed the hell out of this.
We all just have to have me back sometime.
Well, I will.
You have a real brain, and some people do, but you actually use yours, and that's so refreshing. I hope you get out east sometime so that we could have that dinner.
I'm game.
We haven't, we didn't even talk about, for those left behind, for those left to fight. I'm sorry.
No one left to fight.
No one left to fight. Oh my god, I love that.
It's fine. It's getting late there. It's fine, man.
I love that.
Yeah, it is.
I love that book so much.
Like
There's so much.
10 o'clock.
The problem is somebody came up with this idea that we can have titles that are like 18 letters or 18 words long, and you can never remember how they go. But anyway, I love that book, and we'll talk about that some other time. Thank you so much for being here, Aubrey.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful. We will continue to support this book. We will continue to talk about how much we love it, and we, we'll talk to you again.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you,
Probably
gentlemen.
when we get to like the third arc, we'll have you back on. How about that?
Perfect.
Thank you for a wonderful conversation. I appreciate it.
This has been a treat. This has been a highlight of my week, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
All right. Well,
thanks,
man. Tuesday. Come on.
I didn't want to put too fine a point on it, but there's always room for improvement.
It's fair.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank y'all.
That was great.
That was very wonderful.
It's not exactly where I expected it to go, but these never are, and that's the hallmark of a good conversation.
It is. It was a great conversation. It's so important. I think he's doing some really, really groundbreaking work. As crazy as that is, 90 years into this industry, that he's really kind of pushing some new things. Really approaching things in a unique way. We are going to have a guest next week, and Zach Kaplan is coming back to the show. He's been here before. He's going to be here on Tuesday. He's doing some really interesting things as well with the books that he's writing. I highly recommend them. And he's got a new one we're going to talk about next week. He's got a continuation of Kill All Immortals coming up, which the first volume was fantastic. I can't wait for more of it. So that's next week. So please be here. We have some stuff on Pop Culture Squad this week already. You talked about was it Graphic Samurai, which is the Dennis Cowan book that you have out.
The Art of Dennis Cowan. Yeah.
The Art of Dennis Cowan.
Yeah. I just waxed poetic forever.
Sure. No, it's great. I it's a good piece. I loved it. Today we published the new number ones for this week. Interestingly, one of the topics of the night, the omnibus of Black Kiss comes out this week.
Yes. Howard's got a lot of stuff out, reprint stuff out this week. He's got that Marvel thing.
Yes.
Well,
so I did see the actual produced copy of the Black Kiss tome, and it's beautiful, and for the price, it's a steal. I will tell you that. So that comes out this week. There's a bunch of some interesting cool stuff. You should go to popculturesquad.com and you can find out all the stuff that's coming out this week. And we will have some other stuff later on this week at Pop Culture Squad. Make sure you follow us everywhere on your social media at one word Pop Culture Squad.
Everywhere you go, we will be there.
We are going to try, even if it's horrible.
All right. Thank you, folks. We appreciate it as always. Write in. Tell us what you want. Tell us when to shut up.
Yep.
Just write us.
Please keep watching though, and like and follow and subscribe to wherever you're watching this, so you find out where we are next time. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, folks.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?